The black gun was pointed straight at my daughter's face, and the HOA guard's voice cracked as he shouted, "Stop it! You're trespassing." I stood frozen in disbelief. This wasn't just a man enforcing rules. This was a man on a power trip, leveling a weapon at my daughter over something as trivial as a car tire brushing the curb. No warning, no de-escalation, just cold steel aimed at her heart. What he didn't know what would unravel his entire life was who my daughter really was. She wasn't just any woman. He had no idea he was threatening someone with 15 years of experience disarming armed hostage-takers and bringing down domestic terror cells. By sunrise, this self-important watchman would lose his job, his standing, and his freedom. I should probably introduce myself. My name is Daniel Keating. I'm 58 years old and teach political science at the local university. I've lived in Crestwood Meadows for nearly a decade. It's the kind of suburb that prides itself on pristine lawns, identical mailboxes, and a rulebook thicker than any of my course textbooks. After my wife passed away, this neighborhood gave me a kind of predictable calm. I drank coffee on my porch, graded essays, and exchanged neighborly nods with the Watsons across the street and the kind Mrs. Ellison, who still bakes everyone muffins every Sunday. That peace began to rot the day Malcolm Rourke became HOA president. Malcolm, a 62-year-old retiree from the insurance industry, saw his position not as community service but as a chance to live out his long-delayed fantasy of authority. One of his first actions was to create the Crestwood Neighborhood Protection Unit. A fancy name for him and his hand-picked deputy, Darren Buckley, driving around in a clunky SUV with a magnetic siren slapped on top. They dressed in knockoff police-style uniforms complete with clipboards and self-designed patches. They cited residents for violations that didn't even exist. A mailbox too blue, grass too tall, wind chimes too loud. They were petty tyrants with too much time and too little oversight. Malcolm had once applied to the police academy in his 20s but was rejected due to psychological concerns. Darren, a fired mall security guard with a history of excessive force. Together, they turned our once pleasant neighborhood into their playground of authority, especially targeting minorities and newcomers. Sophia Martinez received a fine because her parents visited for the weekend. David Cho was cited for mailbox height and curtain color. Most of us, myself included, quietly paid the fines and avoided confrontation. But there was always this low hum of resentment. Their worst offense? Weaponizing the HOA rulebook. They let friends off the hook while hammering down on anyone they disliked. Our treasurer, Harold Langston, had 10-foot hedges in violation of the regulations but never got so much as a warning. Meanwhile, Mrs. Ellison got a $100 fine because her grandson's tricycle was left in the driveway overnight. Then, last week, everything changed. My daughter, Tessa, called unexpectedly. Tessa, 35, brilliant, fearless. She's not the little girl I used to read bedtime stories to. She's a seasoned federal agent specializing in counterterrorism with the FBI. I hadn't seen her in 2 years. When she told me she had a week off and would be in town for a training seminar asking if she could stay with me, I couldn't say yes fast enough. I spent the day cleaning, shopping for her favorite foods, and just generally vibrating with excitement. In my rush, I forgot to submit her visitor registration to the HOA. Malcolm's most ridiculous rule: residents had to submit guest names 48 hours in advance. But Tessa's arrival would not wait for their bureaucracy. What happened next set off a chain of events none of us could have predicted. Tessa arrived late, just after 11:30 p.m. She used the gate code I'd hidden for her, drove her rental car into the neighborhood, and was immediately pulled over by flashing lights. Thinking it was the police, she complied. But it wasn't the police. It was Malcolm in his Halloween costume uniform, demanding ID, registration, and proof of residency. "You're not on the list," he told her, voice smug with importance. "This is private property. You're trespassing." Tessa remained calm. Years of negotiating with armed radicals had taught her composure. "I'm visiting my father, Daniel Keating. Could you direct me to 102 Oakview Lane?" Malcolm refused. Darren stood behind him, filming the entire thing with his phone. "You might be impersonating someone. We've had recent break-ins." Total nonsense. There hadn't been a break-in in Crestwood in years. When Tessa reached for her phone to call me, Malcolm snapped. He drew his weapon, trembling, shouting, pointing it directly at her chest. What he didn't realize was that he had just pulled a gun on a federal agent. In less than 10 seconds, Tessa had de-escalated armed standoffs with international terrorists. This was child's play. She slowly raised her hands. "Sir, I'm going to reach for my credentials." Slowly, she pulled out her badge. "Special Agent Tessa Keating, FBI. Lower your weapon now." Malcolm didn't move. "Could be fake," he barked, eyes twitching. Tessa gave him every chance to back down, warning him he was interfering with federal operations. Malcolm doubled down. That's when I, awakened by the noise and flashing lights, rushed out in a panic. My heart nearly stopped when I saw my daughter at gunpoint. "Malcolm, that's my daughter. What the hell are you doing?" He didn't lower the gun. I called 911. Tessa remained calm throughout. She reminded Malcolm that his actions had serious consequences. Officer Rachel Lynn from the city police arrived just in time. She ordered Malcolm to drop the weapon. Only then did he comply, sputtering excuses. "She wasn't on the list. We were just protecting the neighborhood." Tessa showed her credentials. Officer Lynn took statements. Malcolm and Darren were allowed to return home that night, but an investigation was opened immediately. Tessa turned to me as we walked home and said, "This guy's been a problem for a while, hasn't he?" I told her everything: the pattern of abuse, the intimidation, the lies. Tessa's jaw clenched. "I've got a week off. Let's fix this." The next day, Tessa went into full investigation mode. She interviewed residents, gathered records, and quietly coordinated with her contacts at the Bureau. She uncovered that Malcolm had created a fake security company, Rourke Protective Services, and billed the HOA thousands in fees for made-up patrols. Darren was being paid under the table. Even worse, Tessa found surveillance files Malcolm had kept on certain resident photos, visitor logs, even copies of license plates. This wasn't security. This was stalking. Scott eventually broke. He admitted to everything in exchange for leniency. He revealed Malcolm's plans to expand the patrol to other neighborhoods and even obtain more weapons. With Judge Langston's help, yes, the treasurer who'd been duped, we compiled a detailed case. The FBI began a broader investigation. At the next HOA meeting, attended by almost every resident, Tessa dropped the hammer. She introduced herself, displayed her badge, and calmly laid out the evidence. Videos, financial records, witness statements. Malcolm's gun incident played on a projector. Gasps, outrage, disbelief. Then Malcolm, red-faced and trembling, pulled a second gun. But before he could say a word, Tessa disarmed him in seconds. Officer Lynn tackled him. The community stood stunned. Malcolm was arrested for embezzlement, impersonating law enforcement, brandishing a weapon, and interfering with a federal agent. Scott received probation and community service. Crestwood Meadows changed overnight. The HOA bylaws were rewritten. Term limits, transparency, financial oversight. The fake patrol was disbanded. A real neighborhood watch was formed, unarmed, cooperative, and diverse. Tessa's case was picked up nationally, triggering reforms across the state. Amanda Chu, a local reporter, published a damning expose. Crestwood became a model for HOA reform. At our next block party, Mrs. Ellison brought Tessa a pie shaped like an eagle. "You gave us our freedom back," she said. Children drew pictures of Tessa as a superhero. Parents thanked her. Well, I just stood in the background and beamed. My daughter had turned a quiet visit into a moment of justice. Before she left, she said, "You know, Dad, sometimes the smallest thrones attract the biggest tyrants. But they fall just as hard." I nodded. And it only takes one person to start the fall. As she drove away, I realized Crestwood wasn't just peaceful again. It was finally free.